Okay, I am going to wrap up the episode on stratigraphy here with a real-world example and the practical uses of stratigraphy. And the example we're going to use is the installation of a water well. What I have over here is I have my basic stratigraphic column of the area I'm going to be drilling my well in. Now these units are hypothetical, our cross-section is hypothetical, but something similar has happened before in Illinois that I'm about to show you. We have our quaternary. We've named this the Tillman Formation, 50 to 200 feet thick. We have an unconformity. Then we have our Ordovician, which is all this. We have our Beckerton Formation. We have our Kimsville Formation. The Kimsville is the only one divided into members. We have three: the Shelley, the Red Creek, and the Morton. We have another unconformity. Then we have our Cambrian, which is here is Carsville. And then we have another unconformity and our Precambrian, which we've named the Unity Granite. Now, this is color-coded based on what we call potential yield in an aquifer. Since we are trying to set a well so we can pull water out of it at a reasonable volume, say we want this for farming. What I've done here is red forms a unit what we call an aquitard, and that means it produces no water or very little water, definitely not enough in the volumes that we're looking for. The black letters are moderate yields. Now, in an ordinary individual home or something like that, a well set in one of these would probably be sufficient, a sufficient yield. But we're looking at a farm well to water our fields with, so we need something with higher yield. The blue letters indicate aquifers. These are continuously high yielding aquifers, and these will continuously produce water. And here in the area we only have two of those which fit what we're looking for. We have the Morton member of the Kimsville, and we have the Carsville Formation, which is a sandstone with a conglomerate at the base. Now, we don't want to set it here just because we have a budget and we can only go so far successfully to meet that budget. So we want to set it within this unit, the Morton member of the Kimsville, which is about 100 to 500 feet in the area. Now the strat column, you see this here, this is a tongue. Okay, we've called it the Red Creek tongue, and this is a shale. Shales will typically form aquitards and aren't very good for yielding large amounts of water. Above, we have a slightly producing unit called the Shelley member, which is a shaly limestone, argillaceous limestone, an impure limestone, which will yield some water, but not the quantities that we're looking for. So we want to set it somewhere in here, is where we want to set our well. Now, say we start drilling. This is my surface. This is going to be another cross-sectional view, a slice into the earth. We're just going to start drilling. And say at 75 feet, from 0 to 75, we can tell that's typical of what would be the Tillman. We'll just assume it's a gray till. So we know that this is our QT. We do not want to put our well in there. And since it's 75 feet thick, it fits within our known thickness range, and that is logical. Now, as a trained geologist, I know that I take this strat column of knowledge that we know and try to apply it to what we're doing here. What most engineers do is they just start drilling a hole, cross their fingers, and hope, because they don't know this. This isn't their thing. Okay? Engineers are very black and white thinkers, and very it is or it isn't. So this tongue is a total foreign concept to most engineers. Say we got down to 75, even an engineer would agree on that. And say we're from a geologic standpoint, looking at geologic maps and stuff like that, say that I know that in this area from other water wells that we're probably going to hit this Red Creek tongue. But I'm going to look for that, okay? I'm going to be aware of its existence, because if I'm not, I could really botch this. Okay, so we go down, and from 75 to 125 feet, which would be about 50 feet, we encounter a limestone. And this is probably our Beckerton, our OB. Now we know we don't want to put the well in there, okay? Now, because it won't yield. It'll yield water, but it won't yield the quantities that we need. Now at 125, I start to hit something. Now usually when these things are installed, we don't take a full rock core. It's just too expensive. What they do is they just start drilling, and you look at the auger. As the auger drills down, think of it as a big screw into the earth. The cuttings are displaced and come back up, because obviously you're inserting something into the solid earth. Something's got to give and go somewhere, and up's the easiest way to go. So you study the cuttings. So that's why you need to understand this, because this will clue you as to what you're looking at. Okay. Now say you're at 125 feet, and you start to see in the cuttings what looks to be essentially like a sandstone. Okay, and it cuts through really easy. You start to see water right at this 125 feet. It's wet. So you stop drilling for a minute. Okay. Now, as an engineer, knowing that I only have a budget for about a 500-foot well, I'm looking at this, and I see that this has moderate yield, this has no yield, and I'm starting to see water actually in the hole. So I start to pump it, and I stop, let's just say it stopped at 130 right now, and it yields a couple gallons per minute. Okay, fine. Like I said, it looks like a sand, like a sand in the cuttings. So, as an engineer, I say, okay guys, knock yourselves out. Let's go to 150. Let's set this well, and it should produce. We set this well. We know we had water in the hole, and we had a reasonable rate of pumping, but we stopped short of what we were allowed, and a year or two goes by, and all of a sudden this is dry. It just won't produce anymore. That's going to cost the farmer a lot of money in the long run, because as an engineer, I didn't have a firm understanding of the stratigraphy. I basically drilled till I found a unit that produced what I needed, set the well, call it a day. Now, as a geologist, I would look at this and say, okay, this looks like a sand coming up at 125 feet. But you know what? It's kind of carbonous. If throw a little acid on it, it fizzes like a carbonate would, like a limestone. So I know that I'm looking for my Morton member over here. And the fact that it fizzes, it's not a quartz sandstone. This is not what I'm looking for. So most likely, I'm in my OKS. I'm in my Shelley member, okay? So I'm down to 150 feet, and all of a sudden, at 150, I hit a dark, hard, gray shale, gray or brown shale at 150. Now that is the same as my hypothetical Red Creek tongue. So I actually have my OKR. I've encountered it at 150 feet. Now, the engineer that set this one at 150, the OKR we know is an aquitard and will not produce. And so we only had about 25 feet of usable, what he assumed was a sandstone, to pull water out of. Now, that worked for a while, but once it was done, we know that this is an aquitard. This only moderately yields. What probably happened was this was used right away, the OKS unit. And then the limestone started to trickle down and, you know, support it for a little bit, but eventually it was used up, because you've only got about 75 feet here of usable water, and if other people have shallow wells set into this, they're going to take it before you do. So our 150 feet wasn't deep enough, and as a geologist that understands stratigraphy, I've hit the 150 foot mark, and I know I'm actually on top of an aquitard. So say we drill another 150 feet. So now we're at 300 feet from here. And at this unit, we are through the Red Creek tongue. So we are through our OKR, because in the auger cuttings what starts to come up is a very yellow, light yellow, grayish quartz sand. So remember, my budget allowed for a 500-foot deep well to set, and I'm only at 300. Now, using what I know about the stratigraphy here, I know that my QT is a no-go, my OB isn't going to work, my OKS will work for a while, but eventually it will stop working. My OKR is not going to work. So I'm at 300 feet, and I'm starting to see my sand. And since I know the stratigraphy, and I've actually looked at geologic maps, I know that I'm on top of my OKM. And we'll assume that there's no faults or any sort of other structures, which we're going to deal with in our next segment, in the area. So I have them drill down to 350. And I have them do a pump test and pump water out, and say I consistently get 5 to 15 gallons per minute over, and I have them do it for a whole day. And at the end of that day, I'm still getting those kind of yields. So I know that I'm in my OKM. I'm getting the yields I want for this farmer in order for him to water his crops over a long period of time. So I could set it there. But I know that the OKM, because of my stratigraphy in the area, is at least 100 feet thick, up to 500. And since there's an unconformity here, this thickens at the expense of this. So I'm going to have them drill down to 400 feet. I have them do that. I'm still seeing that light yellow to gray quartz sandstone, and I'm still getting the yields that I was getting before. So I encountered the OKM at a depth of 300 feet. I'm down to 400. I still haven't encountered the bottom of it. I could go all the way through just to see where it is, but like I said, I have a budget here for a 500-foot well. With a 100-foot buffer here, it isn't necessary for me to go to the 500. 150 was way too short. But 400, with 100 feet of this sandstone above me, and say that other wells in the area are used for private use, but none of them are set here, and the fact to say the other wells in the area are set in our OKS, so we have a bunch of wells, and some are set in our OB, but none are down here, and we have a separate aquitard right here. So these people are pulling from a totally different aquifer than I'm trying to pull from here. So even if they pull all the water out of my OKS and OB units, that's not going to affect this at all, because I'm separated by this OKR, which is an aquitard. So I'm good right there. If I set that well at 400 feet for the farmer, not only have I saved him money because my budget was for 500 feet, but it's going to continually produce the yields that he wants for a long period of time. I set it right there. The farmer's good to go. He's under budget. He's happy. He's well produces. He can water his fields. And this is how you use stratigraphy, a division of geology, and apply it practically to the real world, in a real world example, in this case setting of a water well. So this stuff is more than just academic. It does have practical use and extends beyond the practical use of engineering. And you need a geologist to do this, to figure this out. An engineer isn't going to go this far into depth. Well, that concludes our second segment on stratigraphy, and the next segment is structural geology. So that concludes this episode, and I hope you learned something. Thank you.